But today in India, through reforms, modernization, education, guess what? As a young man who was born an untouchable, went to school, because he's untouchable, he sat in the corner, other students couldn't touch him, he studied hard, passed exams, got scholarships, went to university, did well, got a scholarship for Columbia University, got a PhD in economics, and is now the chief economist of the Reserve Bank of India. Now his brain, for thousands of years, would never have been used. And now that unused brains are being used. And the reason I emphasize this story, because I know I'm speaking at a gold symposium. And you look for gold in the hills, in the mountains, but there's a different kind of gold that you can mine. And it may be in the shanty towns, not too far away. And this human gold is the most powerful driving force in history. And Asia has found a way to mine this human gold. So what's the fifth pillar of Western wisdom? It's a culture of peace. And why is a culture of peace important? Because wars have been the main factor preventing economic growth and development. And indeed, the three biggest wars fought since World War II were in Asia. The Korean War, 1950s, the Vietnam War, 1960s, 1970s, and the Great Sino-Vietnamese War, 1979. All the biggest wars have been fought in Asia. But now, in a remarkable development, the region which has seen the biggest wars since World War II, in that region today, the guns are silent. There are no interstate wars happening. And indeed, the prospects of interstate wars keep going down. And if you take two examples of two states that have been fighting each other, not for 100 years, not for 200 years, but for 2,000 years. Indeed, one of them was occupied by the other for 1,000 years. And this is, of course, China and Vietnam. And as recently as 1990, 20 years ago, you had 1 million Chinese soldiers confronting 1 million Vietnamese soldiers across one of the most heavily armed fortified borders in the world, full of artillery, full of landmines. Today, in that border, the 1 million Chinese soldiers are gone, the 1 million Vietnamese soldiers are gone, the artillery is gone, the landmines are gone, and all you see at the border today are smugglers going to and fro, because trade is the name of the game today. That's an example of a dramatic transformation taking place in Asia. So what's the sixth pillar of Western wisdom? I would describe it as the rule of law. And the reason why the rule of law is important is because if you look at the one place in the world where you see the fastest growth in trade that is happening, the fastest growth in investments that is happening, it's all in Asia. Now, for money to travel across borders, for goods to travel across borders, for services to travel across borders, they must have confidence that it's safe. And what's giving them safety? It's the progressive increase in the rule of law. And therefore, quite naturally, the country that is producing the largest number of new lawyers and the largest number of new judges today is China. Because you cannot have this explosion in trade and commerce without an explosion in the rule of law. Now, later on, when we get to question and answers, you can challenge me on some of these points. There are problems in the rule of law In many Asian countries, they have not achieved perfection, and I think we can discuss some of the challenges that they face, but the trend line is a very positive one in the region. And the final, of course, pillar of wisdom is the most obvious one. I've hinted at it, mentioned it indirectly, and that, of course, is education. And frankly, as you could tell from my story about meritocracy, is the spread of education in Asia, the harvesting of new minds, that is a major driving force in Asia. But of course, the amazing thing is that it's happening on an amazing scale, right? China had only 200 universities in 1949 when they achieved independence and formed the People's Republic of China. But today, it has 3,000 universities. And they had set a target. They wanted to increase the people in going to university. They set a target of 15% in 2005. And they've already hit 23% of the cohort. Now again, statistics I can give you. But let me just tell you one story. I was in Guangdong. Now Guangdong is one city in southern China. Used to be called Canton, the famous Canton Trade Fair. It has some famous universities. I'm a dean of a school. I went to visit the universities, the Sun Yat-sen University in the middle of the Canton. So I said, hey, how are you doing? They said, oh, you're doing very well, but we have no space. So I said, what do you do? He said, well, we collaborated with some of our neighboring universities, and we built a satellite campus outside Guangdong. So I said, can I go see the satellite campus? I said, okay. They said, okay. So I drove out the city, and I went to one satellite campus in one Chinese city. I thought I might see 5,000 students, or 10,000 students, or 20,000 students, or 30,000 students, satellite campus, Now, in one satellite campus, in one Chinese city, I found 150,000 university students. Now that's an explosion in scale. That's amazing. And if this continues, it is quite inevitable that the rise of Asia will continue. But what's amazing about this Asian story is not how it applies each pillar, each of the 7 pillars of Western wisdom, but how the combination of the 7, the synergistic combination of the 7, has now led to what I call the most important development in Asia, which is the explosion of cultural confidence in Asia. It's an explosion of cultural confidence of nuclear proportions. And that's why, if you want to go and find the most optimistic young people in the world today, before you would go to Europe, but today don't go to Europe. Very few young people in Europe believe that they will have a better life than their parents. And amazingly enough, even the latest survey in North America, in the United States of America, the most optimistic country in the world, the latest survey showed only 29% of young Americans thought that they would have a better life than their parents. But if you go to Asia, if you go to China, and you go to India, the vast majority of young people are convinced that they will have a better life tomorrow. And this cultural confidence is going to make it the Asian century without a shadow of doubt. But I don't want to give you the impression that history always moves in a straight line. Nothing ever moves in a straight line. The ride forward for Asia will be a roller coaster. You'll go up, you'll go down, you'll go up, you'll go down. That's what the nature of life is like. And there are many challenges, that Asians will face. And in the next 5-10 minutes that I have, let me speak briefly about the challenges. And I describe the 3 challenges as the 3 Gs. So what's the first G? The first G is, I call, the challenge of good governance. Believe me, for any society to succeed and do well, it has to have good governance. And here, fortunately, sometimes by luck, many Asian societies are benefiting from good governance. And one of the